and welcome to episode 125 of Random Encounter, the RPG Fan Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Steinman, Pale Robbie on the boards. Joining me today is Derek, I Hate Mass Effect, Andromeda Heemsbergen.
You're always going for the hateful stuff. I was going to say I should be Derek Cup Noodle Heemsbergen because I played episode Gladio, and there was Cup Noodle in that, just as one would expect.
Is everything still so lovingly rendered on Final Fantasy 15 in terms of food products?
Yeah, I mean, you can see like the side of the cup, but what is lovingly rendered are Gladio's abs because you can get a shirtless costume for him by completing the DLC.
Ooh, excellent.
I'm sorry, he's already not shirtless because he's pretty shirtless as it is.
Oh, it's like full shirtless this time, which I'm surprised he shaves, you guys. Would you expect that? I wouldn't expect that.
Who, Gladio? Oh, totally. Yeah,
really?
Come on, man.
All right.
Like, of course he does. Maybe that's just me. Then we also have Caitlin. I wish I was playing Persona 5 Argyros. I almost said Heemsbergen. I almost said Heemsbergen.
Did we get married?
Maybe? That would be news for everybody, I think.
Yeah, wait. Hey, Caitlin, how you doing?
Caitlin, how we doing?
I'm good. I'm trying to imagine what crazy universe that would be. Maybe in Andromeda? I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe.
If we have to go into deep space, then procreation is the
objective
there, right?
I did make my writer's brother a super hot, looker. Like, maybe your writer and my writer's brother could hook up. I don't know.
So it could be family, at least in-laws.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Oh boy. That would be kind of now. Wait, if you were traveling into deep space and you were trying to procreate for the species, would there be like a questionnaire of like, please guys, I'm not like, don't read into my politics on this at all, but it's like, do you think that would be part of the questionnaire? It's like, oh yeah, have to be straight in order.
No, I think it would just be, do you want to have a child? Because you can be gay and have a child, right?
But you cannot produce a child. Well, no, I guess
sure you can.
If you had a lesbian couple, you could do in vitro. You could do. Okay, all right. So we have to take. So we
you
would
think
have
that I wouldn't like if I was going on a mission into deep space? You think I wouldn't take one for the team, as it were, and have a child if I had to?
Just find an Asari. They can help you.
Right. Also, they have like deep space technology, man. They can just extract my.
I'm just spitballing here, all right? We're having a conversation. I'm trying to think this stuff through. These are important questions. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what's going on. Okay, so Mass Effect Andromeda came out, right?
Right, it sure did.
And I don't want to say the internet is... I think hate is a strong word, but I think there's a little bit of...
There's
anger.
Hyperbole happening.
I think hyperbole is a very good word for it. I also think that there's a lot of criticism being leveled at this game, and as an outside observer, somebody that only played Mass Effect 2 and 3, I read the story on 1, but I didn't like the way it played. And, I'm in the camp that thinks that Mass Effect 3's story was pretty terrible at the end, but like the gameplay was still fun. I guess I was looking at Andromeda as being more gameplay, and I kind of get this feeling like Andromeda's getting some of the Mass Effect 3 hate that didn't happen. Like the retroactive Mass Effect 3 hate where people, kind of like how we talked about on the last episode about Zelda. Like, there's the Zelda cycle of like, this is the best Zelda. Yeah, go ahead, Derek.
We had this discussion. Yeah. Right, we had this discussion about people's feelings from previous games in that series sort of carrying over and blending into how they feel about the new one, even though it's separated. Mm-hmm. And I do think that some of that sentiment is coming through. And I also think that, I don't remember if it was Robert Fenner who wrote something about this recently, but I know that sometimes I am susceptible to the groupthink that happens in the video game sort of community. I think that sometimes, I don't think, it's very, very hard to become free from it. You can become aware of it and do your best to combat it. But I think that it is easy to get swept up into a conversation or kind of a narrative that is created around a certain game's release. Like when everybody is saying Zelda Breath of the Wild is the best game ever or whatever, it's going to be, it's easier to be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it is. But it also means that dissent is seen as like some kind of weird revolutionary action where you're just trying to get attention for disagreeing, which isn't necessarily the case. And it is in fact rarely the case. But with Mass Effect Andromeda, I think that people saw stuff like the janky animations, and they just kind of latched onto that. And then there was that whole fiasco with people attacking that supposedly the animator who doesn't even do that job within BioWare.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So I think people latch on to those sort of ideas and they're like, yeah, rah, and it becomes this mob mentality where everybody wants to crap on it. When I mean, it's like, if you really think about it, are the animations crappy? Yeah. Could they have done better? Yeah. Like, did it ruin my entire life? No. I mean, uh, so when you look at stuff like Mass Effect Andromeda getting sort of a lower score average than previous Mass Effect games in the series, it's not necessarily that the game is utter trash. I just think that there are more things to criticize in the game. And I scored it, I reviewed it for RPG Fan. I scored it a 78 because the current state of gaming journalism is that like anything below a 5 is basically considered utter garbage, you know. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but it's just the reality of how scores work right now. And if we're going to continue with the scoring system, I don't know. So I realized that I play a part in all that. So I tried to give it what I thought was a fair score. A 78 to me doesn't mean that I had a terrible time playing it. It means that I had a pretty good time playing it, and in fact, I can recommend the game to some people. But there are issues that need to be criticized and pointed out. You know, like 78 doesn't mean shit. It really doesn't. So I think everybody needs to chill out about this whole narrative that they created with, well, Mass Effect's animations are bad and they just didn't even try, and oh my god, it's the worst thing ever. Like, it's really not the worst thing ever, you guys. It's just flawed, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a little bit of, for me, as somebody who was playing Zelda after all the reviews went out, just to go back to our Zelda conversation from last week, for me, it was kind of the opposite, where I was seeing a lot of flaws or a lot of things that were really annoying me, and I started going, is something wrong with me? Like, am I the only one seeing these flaws? Like, it actually, like, the groupthink started to work the other way. Like, wait, why am I not digging this? Why is this a problem for me? And I don't really have an answer for that. I'm not really sure why that was happening, but you know, I think Robert was correct, and Derek, you were also correct on the last podcast saying, you know, a 10 does not mean a perfect game. But for me, somebody that's kind of a gameplay-oriented person, you know, I tend to kind of focus on gameplay flaws, and they can really annoy me. And what I saw a lot of in Zelda reviews was, oh yeah, you know, the weapon degradation kind of sucks, but you know, it didn't really hurt my enjoyment of the game. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here going, well, it certainly did for me. Like, it really hurt my enjoyment of the game. So I think it's tough. You don't want to get caught into the groupthink, but at the same time, you do want to have your own opinion that isn't influenced in the opposite effect because of other people's.
And that's why review scores can be so contentious, because you know, a score doesn't encompass the full experience that a person has playing a game. And as we've said many times, every game review is subjective because every experience a person has with a game is subjective, whether you're reviewing it or not. But when you see something like a 10, I think you know, higher score is just sort of a general barometer of quality, and then you can sort of dissect the smaller bits as you get in closer, because you know, the 10 isn't perfect, and there are many games that I would, if I had to score them, I would score them much lower than a 10, but I still felt like they were some of the best games I had ever played because they just suited my tastes the best. And something like the weapon degradation is, I beat Breath of the Wild recently, and I didn't really have too much of a problem with weapon degradation because it's annoying. Yes, I don't like it, and I think that it shouldn't necessarily be a game mechanic, but it never broke the experience for me because I never had a point where I was like running out of weapons or, you know, had no way to fight back. And I can see where if you got into that situation, that would really sour the entire game for you. And Rob, I think that, you know, you had bad experiences with that, and for you that matters more than it would to some people necessarily.
Totally. Yeah. No, I agree. And you know, I don't really, with Mass Effect, I'm kind of staying out of this one because I have not played the new game. I really have no desire because there's so many other games to play. So, you know, Nier is still on my bucket list over here. So, I'm kind of staying out of this a little bit, but what I see is a game that everybody seems to agree the combat's really good. And Caitlin, you were saying that a little bit before the pre-show, that you're having a lot of fun playing this game. It's maybe the storytelling that people are a little upset about.
Well, I've certainly seen a lot of people complain about the writing, and that a lot of people think that the storytelling is weaker than the original trilogy. But then, you know, this is one of those things where it's going to come down to individual opinion and what you are looking for in the game, and what you know, your personal tastes. And I think it's going to be hard to say definitively that it sucks compared to the original trilogy, or that it's bad because it's subjective. Thus far, I'm satisfied. It's a different vibe than the original trilogy. It doesn't have quite the same sort of feeling to it, because you don't have necessarily the same sort of a threat, I guess, that you're facing. It's not the same kind of enemy that you're dealing with. There's a bit more of a lighthearted feeling to it. You're more exploring this new galaxy and making friends and trying to survive than necessarily uncovering an ancient evil and figuring out how to stop it. Although there are, of course, bad guys, and you are trying to figure out what they're after and things like that. There are mysteries to solve, but it's kind of a different focus. And that's going to appeal to people in different ways. It's, it's, like I said, it's different. It's a different kind of focus from the original trilogy. So, if you're looking for the same kind of feel as the Shepherd trilogy, it may be a disappointment. But I'm actually finding it just fine, for me personally. I know I was talking to Derek before release how I actually kind of thought that the focus of this game sort of being more on setting out to explore and find a new home kind of resonated with me, with the state of our, like real world space exploration, the way how we're kind of sort of fumbling about with our actual space exploration. The idea of any real meaningful space travel to a neighboring, even just a neighboring star system, let alone a neighboring galaxy, being a real time sink like that, and the idea of needing to start over and actually try to find ways to survive, feeling a lot more, and I don't want to say realistic, because come on, it's a video game, it's Mass Effect, but that actually feels a little bit more closer to home than the way the original Mass Effect started out, where we had already essentially been jump-started into a galactic society, where we'd already made first contact, we'd already basically been pushed into a galactic community on the Citadel, met other alien races. We were still the new people, but we'd already made a name for ourselves and we already knew the galaxy. Here, we've just arrived. We don't know anything really about this, the cluster we arrived in. In fact, that's part of the mystery, is trying to figure out why the worlds that we thought were going to be perfect for us, why they're not that way, and trying to make them habitable for humanity, for the Milky Way races. And there's a kind of, if that kind of tingles your sci-fi interest, that, can be really fun. And then, the combat is a whole lot of fun. They've done a lot to open that up and make it so that you're no longer locked into a particular class like you were in the original trilogy. Instead, you just put points into any one of the three main branches. Your combat branch, which used to be basically the soldier branch in the original trilogy, and then biotics and tech, and you can mix and match as you see fit, which opens up a lot of different possibilities, and you're no longer penalized if you pick one of those abilities and you suddenly say, I don't really like this, I want to do something else. You can do that, and you can just start putting points into something else. So it opens up a lot of freedom. And I was saying before we started recording, I was never the kind of person who wanted to do the Vanguard tree, which is the biotic combat oriented tree, where you use a biotic charge to basically charge into an enemy and then, do a lot of damage. It's a high risk skill where you can restore shields and do a lot of damage, but you're suddenly right in front of the enemy and you can die really fast if you're not careful. I was never the kind of person who would do that before, but I started playing with it here because I knew that I could just spec into some other skills if I didn't like it. And
right,
I
because it's
found
great
that
flexibility.
Yeah. it allows you to really explore and try things out. And if you don't like it, then hey, you're not penalized. You're not forced to play the rest of the game using those skills. And I found I really liked it. And so now I'm running around with a shotgun and a sniper rifle and charge and tactical cloak, so I can actually go long range or up in the enemy's face, depending on situation. So it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly seems like the combat's the fun part. Derek, were you enjoying that aspect of the game as much?
I was. I like the jump jet a lot. I think it adds a good sense of verticality to combat, and you can sort of more dynamically jump and hide behind cover. And I found that I didn't tool around enough with other loadouts during my playthrough, so I think that I actually held myself back in a way, and that limited my enjoyment a little bit because I went pretty heavy on the tech stuff, and I felt like my turret never really did all that much. But yeah, combat's fun, and I enjoyed playing the multiplayer. I did that a little bit. And it's PvE, like co-op, so you have other people on your team and you're fighting. It's waves of enemies. It's just like Mass Effect 3's, basically. But I thought that was fun, too. I think the combat is strong enough to carry it, but my pro tip would be to switch up your loadout a lot more often than I did, and I think the game, it encourages you to pick sort of a specialization because they have the profiles, which are kind of like stances. And so like if you put a lot of points into tech abilities, you'll get sort of the engineer profile. And anytime you have that activated, it's like a passive stance that gives you benefits to all of your tech stuff. Like maybe your turret will be more durable or tech abilities will do more damage or whatever. So by switching one of those, it kind of encourages you to stick to a certain loadout. But I think that there are the similar to previous Mass Effects. There are the ones that are hybrids, like Vanguard, and I think the game is probably more fun if you stick to a hybrid profile and or have a more hybrid skill set or loadouts saved. Because if you stick to just one type, it can get kind of repetitive. But I think that was my fault as a player that I didn't experiment enough. But I still think that the system is more flexible this time and it's better for it.
Does this game set up a new Mass Effect trilogy?
It could. Without spoiling anything, of course, the ending is kind of abrupt and just totally leaves the door open for anything else to happen at all. So of course they could. I think I remember hearing that BioWare said they wanted to create more Mass Effect games in the Andromeda cluster, but not necessarily focused on the writers. So I could see that. Because I feel like the writer's story is satisfactorily concluded at the end of the game. So,
do you guys feel, and this is not a loaded question, I'm not trying to walk you guys into a trap here or anything, but like, do you guys feel the way a lot of fans have been criticizing the game's story, that it's kind of cheap that they set up, a couple wildly different ways that the Milky Way galaxy could have ended at the end of Mass Effect 3, and then they just moved us to another galaxy where they never have to touch on that?
I think that's the only way they could have done it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think if they hadn't done that, if they had kept this in the Milky Way, I think that would have exasperated the issues people had with the ending of Mass Effect 3, because they would have had to have consolidated the endings of Mass Effect 3, which would have made people feel like their choices had even less impact than they already did.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the biggest complaint about Mass Effect 3's ending, was that it ultimately felt like your choices came down to almost nothing. It came down to, three colors, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the only choices were a completely new location or something happening before the trilogy, really. And this is essentially both in a sense.
Or it could be like super, super far in the future in the Milky Way, but you would have to it would have to be far enough in the future that it's like a starting all over kind of vibe. Like, well, in the distant past this happened and now everybody's a synthetic, but we don't even really think of that as being weird, but everything's back to being the same. Like,
Well, what's interesting too is that they've left themselves open for DLC that could potentially bring some elements of Mass Effect 3 into the game, because there's at least one arc that is late. in arriving. I won't say which one for people who don't want to be spoiled, but they mention an arc that was late because they wanted to throw other people onto it.
Mm-hmm.
They could add that arc as DLC, and if that arc took off even a few years late in the timeline, it would have left either during the events of Mass Effect 3 or possibly after Mass Effect 3.
Okay. So they could introduce sort of people who know what happened at the end
Yeah.
and were affected by it.
Yeah, so they could throw in some events of Mass Effect 3 and possibly give the players some maybe ability to control what those events are. I don't know.
Okay. Huh.
But it would be interesting. There's
So
when
it
you
would
start
be like
playing,
a Dragon Age situation where you just select what ending happened kind of thing?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on what they do and exactly when this arc was supposed to have left, but
Right.
the timing of it, I mean, because the original initiative was supposed to have left shortly at some point between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, so the timing of it is kind of...
Gotcha.
It'd be nice because there are certain races missing in Andromeda that I would like to see.
Yeah, and then, one of the complaints levied against it is that you go to an entirely new part of space and it's still basically bipedal humanoids in spacesuits,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think it's maybe not lazy, but just like lacking in creativity.
And they really fall back on the same type of knee structure for all of their aliens. Have you noticed that? Like the Turians and the Solarians and the new friendly alien species, the Angarans.
Jaws race.
Yeah, they all walk the same way. I mean, like, what's up with that? Come on.
You guys wanted it to be a little bit more alien, is what you're saying.
It would have been nice. I mean, you expect there to be humanoids, of course, but...
Yeah. I think it's a fair criticism that the alien design in Andromeda isn't quite up to par with the original trilogy, so...
Mm-hmm. But I think there are some things that Andromeda does very well. Like, Caitlin says she liked the idea of the starting fresh angle, and I think that's really cool, too. And there are some seriously... I mean, even for the character models looking the way they do and not always being great, the environments are amazing. And some of the planets, when you explore, you see all this lush alien foliage, and the way that the sun kind of crests over mountains and stuff is it's beautiful, and it really does make you kind of want to explore. It's a shame that I find those places to be a little lacking in stuff to do, so there's not a lot of reason to explore or incentive. But unlike Zelda, I feel like I don't get quite enough out of exploration for me to go do it, but it's still pretty. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty game from that perspective for sure.
I get a lot of Mass Effect 1 vibes from this game. There's a lot of specifically Mass Effect 1, not 2 or 3, but specifically Mass Effect 1 vibes from not just the planets, but a lot of different elements of this game, but in kind of a good nostalgic way. Like, I've been working on a planet that reminds me a lot of Noveria, specifically. I remember taking the Mako out in the frozen wastes of Noveria and one of the Uncharted worlds that was also a frozen hellhole, so... Yeah, and kind of the way that your squad mates follow you around nilly-willy and can't seem to find their way, sometimes, and get in your way, when you're not, when you don't have your guns out, kind of reminds me of Mass Effect 1, and, other little things here and there. I don't know. People have mentioned that it kind of feels like more Mass Effect, and I think, that's an interesting point because I think that can be a negative or a positive depending on your point of view and maybe also depending on, like, the franchise. Like, I think if someone said to me it's more Assassin's Creed, that would be like a no, thank you, I don't want that. That's right. No. But, like, more Mass Effect is that's almost all I think I'd kind of wanted from this game, for it just to be more Mass Effect is fine. I mean, like, as long as it's not like horrible Mass Effect, and it's not. I mean, it's got problems, it has issues, and I am also going to be interested to see what they say that they're going to do to hopefully fix some of the issues from a technical standpoint. But it is indeed more Mass Effect. So if that's what you're looking for, as long as, you at least maybe temper your expectations a little bit, I think you will enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I think so too.
And it sounds like the sense of wonder that you were just describing, Caitlin, the fact that like Mass Effect 1, which I, bounced right off of, everybody talks about the sense of wonder and like going to the moon and that planet and how amazing that was. And then Mass Effect 2 and 3 very much felt like Uncharted to me. Like they're cover shooters. They are like that. The wonder is in the storytelling, but not in the exploration, if that makes sense. I mean, they are basically corridor shooters deep down. And they're very enjoyable corridor shooters. Like I had a lot more. I like the shooting in Mass Effect more than Uncharted. I know someone just got very angry with me, but like that's how I honestly feel. I found that to be very satisfying. I played as an Inquisitor the whole way through. Infiltrator. Sorry, I was doing Star Wars. Sorry, my fault. But I really enjoyed it for that. And I think if Mass Effect Andromeda was going for that Dragon Age Inquisition sense of wonder and place, even if they screwed some things up along the way, I think that's kind of what that's the messaging they were hearing from a lot of fans, wasn't it? Like that's what people at least said they wanted.
Yeah, and it's all right.
It's okay. It is okay to not be perfect.
Yes,
it is
that's
okay.
That's why I'm still here, guys.
Aw, Derek, you're perfect in my eye, and I'm really excited to see you again at E3. I'm really glad that we're both heading there. Like,
always.
Yeah, I was kind of worried, kind of a lot of stuff going on these days, really busy with my job and, that sort of thing. But I sat down with the wife and we talked about it. I was like, I think I need to go. Like, I need to have...
She gave you permission to come see me and do our once-a-year special thing.
I know. Snuggle time. But it's just like, I think it's good for me to, like, get away from work and kind of do something a little bit more fun. Yeah, who would have thought, right? I know.
I wish Caitlin was coming, too.
I know.
Talk about her like she's not here.
I'll be there in spirit.
Last year was really hard when I found out that Zodiac Age was coming out, and I was like, oh, Caitlin's going to be so excited to see it, and then you didn't come to E3, and I was really bummed about that. So what have I been doing? Oh boy, somebody's gonna get mad at me, but I gotta do it. I've been playing the last episode of the DLC for Dark Souls 3, the Ringed City, or Derek coined it the Ringed City, and I just think that sounds more Dark Souls. It's kind of been it's been interesting going back to play Dark Souls 3 after so much Neo. I think you really learn to appreciate that From Software might be the best in the business when it comes to enemy design. Like, they have so many varied creatures and just different monstrosities coming at you, and that you're constantly varying up your tactics. And I think where Neo kind of had, like, William has so many moves and how much depth he has to his moveset, only fighting the same enemies over and over again kind of makes that feel very stale. So I'm playing that. I'm going to finish it up. I think I'm like one bonfire away from the final boss. It is stupid difficult. Like, it is, if Dark Souls 3 was pretty easy, and I think I said that last year when we talked about it, I didn't have much trouble with Dark Souls 3. This is like we designed this to be super challenging, which is pretty cool. There's also a lot of variety in the types of traps that they put at you now. They kind of had the angels that are like homing death turrets, and you kind of have to stealth your way past them a little bit. That works pretty well. A couple enemy types are maybe a little bit more obnoxious than I would like. They need to cool it with the self-heal on the turtle-like enemies, that you can end up fighting them for 5 minutes because they just keep healing themselves. Boss fights been... Yeah, I know. It's one of those mechanics, like, if they would just cool down the number of times they could do it, it would be okay.
Oh, God. That, random aside, I hate that in Trails of Cold Steel 2.
Oh, really? The regenerating enemies?
Derek, I'm sure you remember a couple of boss fights where the enemies do that. It pisses me off.
Yeah, I'm just not really fond of that as a mechanic. Usually it's like, let me make progress. Stop taking
I know it's like, it only sounds fair, like you can heal, so enemies should be able to too, but like when they like heal like a third of their HP in like one move, and you're like, that's gonna take me like 10 minutes to get rid of. You realize this.
I think it's when they spam it. That's what really gets me. Like if these guys could only do it once, maybe twice, I'd be okay with it. But I've had them do it 10 times in a row. And that's like, and you actually cannot kill them fast enough. If they decide to use this move, you can have them down to 20 hit points and be trying to get the last attack in on them, and you can't. So that's a little annoying. I'm really excited to fight the last boss. I watched a video of it just because I'm not. I don't know what it is, but I'm not really big into spoilers when it comes to Souls games, probably because the story is so insane in these games that it's kind of impossible to ruin it for yourself. So I watched a video of the last boss, and he looks really cool, so I'm looking forward to fighting him. This game also made me appreciate Dark Souls 3 a lot more. I think, it came out, and I played it, and I liked it, but I was maybe a little harsher on it than I should have been. I actually think they made a very, very good game. It has some problems here and there, but it's really good. It's really enjoyable. It's more Souls if that's what you're looking for. And I guess now the question is, do we see their new game do we see From Software's new game at E3? I kind of hope not. In a way, like I want it to be like another year before we see anything out of them. I really want this game to come out of the gate super creative, and watch they make an Armored Core game. But like,
didn't Miyazaki say he was working on an Armored Core game? Something very straightforward and something totally new, and the straightforward thing that people expect is Bloodborne 2, right?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think if we're at Sony and they announce Bloodborne 2, I'm on the one hand I'm going to be bummed, but that is my favorite game in the franchise. I just, I would like another action RPG of this style, but I do think I want to see it really pushed forward. I think that they pretty much perfected the Dark Souls style game with Dark Souls 3. Like, that game plays very, very well. That's the game I recommend to people. Like, if they're saying, I want to play a Souls game, I say you should play Dark Souls 3. It is the gentlest game in the franchise. I actually disagree with Austin Walker, formerly of Giant Bomb. I was reading his review of 3 again, and he said that like the opening of 3 was very, very difficult. I very much disagree with that. I think 3 might have the most approachable opening out of all of them, whereas Bloodborne might be the most vicious opening out of all of them. Like, I don't know. I want to see what they do. I just love collecting their art design books. I just think those guys are fantastic with their art design, with their world building. And, I'm also hopeful for Neo. I think we're going to see another Neo 2 based on how well that's sold. Seems to be a little surprise for Sony. And I just hope that they work on, enemy variety and level design a little bit, because their action-y combat is very distinct. And that's the part of that game that works really well. It's the other stuff that, a little bit of work here and there, but E3 is getting exciting, and I want to see. On the one hand,
out.
I know. On the one hand, I really want to see what From Software is doing, but on the other hand, another year of anticipation might be really cool. Like, just
isn't that crazy?
I know. 2 months. We're gonna start getting the leaks. It's gonna start happening. The leaks are gonna start coming. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, guys.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Oh my
I'm
gosh.
so freaking excited.
The thought that might actually come out this year is...
We can't get our hopes up, but man, that'd be cool.
Oh, my hopes are up.
A 1 year span of FF15, Persona 5, and Xenoblade. Not to mention like all the other things, but I feel like those are very big name games at the very least.
Can you imagine if it did come out, how hard our job is going to be trying to figure out what...
Game of the year?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, I mean, I gotta say, and Derek hinted at it a minute ago, so I do want to go back to Zelda for a second. I don't think Zelda's in any risk of being maybe even in my top 5. I really, really like that game. I don't want people to think I'm hating on it. I'm not trying to join the hipster bandwagon of hate that is definitely going to happen for this game. In my opinion, I think that's definitely going to happen in the next year or so. I really, really like Breath of the Wild. I like so many things it was doing, but when I finished it, there was a little bit of a hollowness. There was a little bit of like, I don't want to say I missed the Zelda formula, but there are aspects of that game that really frustrate me. I really wish that the 4 main dungeons in the game were better. Nobody's going to convince me that those dungeons are good. Like, one of them was fine, but the same dungeon design 4 times was a huge letdown. The shrines started to really just grate on my nerves a little bit. Like, they're really cool, and I like the idea of having these small bite-sized dungeons. I think it works phenomenally well with the Switch as a design philosophy, like the ability to put it into suspend mode after you do 1 or 2 shrines on the way to work or something. That's great. But there's something about those big, massive Zelda dungeons not being there that's kind of a hole. And I don't know. I just kind of finished it, and I don't actually remember a whole lot of it. The overall experience is very positive, but it kind of has the open world game problem where there aren't a lot of memorable moments. Like, at least that's for me. It
You
is a
don't think
good.
there are memorable moments in Breath of the Wild?
I think there's a few. Some of the ways that you, without going to spoiler territories, the ways that you get into the dungeons, those kind of mini
I think
game
those
esque
are all
things.
great. Yeah.
Not the Goron one. No, 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 no. That ain't
That's my
good.
least favorite of them all, but
That
it's
one.
That's where I'm going next.
That one goes on way too long. That goes way too long.
I think because the actual interiors of the divine beasts, if you figure them out rather quickly, they can be pretty fast dungeons, all things considered.
Yeah, they
I
can
don't
be like
think any of the
15, 20
divine
minutes,
beasts, are as long as a temple in the previous Zelda game. But
No.
Yeah.
I think that it's intended to. I think you're supposed to think of the entire experience as the moment, like the journey to to the region where it is, to
Yeah.
meeting the character,
Mhm.
to having them help you get inside it, to doing the dungeon. That's the entire experience.
Yeah,
I can
that's
dig
kind of
that.
how I felt about it too.
Yeah, I can dig that. I like that, and I think actually the best area for that was probably the Zora area, like that
Which
long.
is surprising because you would expect the water one to be the worst, right?
Yeah, but like the long trek to the Zora dungeon was really, really good. I even though it kind of annoyed me a little bit because it's kind of a gameplay conceit, you can't climb on the walls in this area. I still dug that, and it made me play the game very differently. I like that, but I don't know, something about that game it's a little. Maybe I'm just the hater in the room.
Hollow is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, hollow was really the right word. Even the final boss, I'm not going to go into spoilers. I mean, but I just didn't jive with them all that much. Design wise, phenomenal, but like actual like getting there, the boss fights in general in the game were very underwhelming. I did the Gerudo dungeon last. That fight just didn't feel good. Maybe I just had the dungeon in an orientation where it wasn't fun, but that whole thing just felt like I was struggling with the environment more than the actual boss. Maybe that was the point.
It's the electric one, right?
Yeah, I really didn't like that one. And I didn't die at all to, like, any of the bosses. They never were at risk of killing me.
So I think an interesting thing that Breath of the Wild does is you have such an expanded tool set for dealing with many tasks that you approach in the game, whether self-imposed or storyline wise, that you can do things in a variety of ways, and the most straightforward, or sort of like the way that the expected quote unquote way that you feel like you're supposed to do something isn't necessarily the right way or the most efficient way. Like in other Zelda games, usually you have a dungeon, you get a new item in that dungeon, and then that item is used as part of the gimmick for the boss. Since Breath of the Wild gives you all of its tools up front, you don't really know at any given point which the best thing to use is. So it's like, do I just suck? Am I supposed to be using lightning arrows? But once you experiment, because the game encourages you to do so, you can find effective strategies. But for some reason, the way that I play games, I often feel like I'm kind of cheating or doing it wrong if I find a particularly effective strategy that seems like it's not intended necessarily. But that's sort of the underlying philosophy of how Breath of the Wild works, is for you to use that tool set and experiment. So
I can agree with that. Yeah,
it depends on the way that you play games or approach them, I guess, because I find that even after all this time, I still like or require a specific degree of structure in my video games for me to fully enjoy them, which is why I tend to like linear experiences where you have control over the minutia, or like a long JRPG like Trails of Cold Steel. I can still control the development of my characters, or I can like choose how long I want to spend exploring each town, that kind of thing. But I still prefer to have that guidance, that gentle push in the direction towards the finish line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There were moments playing Breath of the Wild where I was having the exact same, I don't want to say problem, but the exact same experience that you just described, which was
for me, it is a problem.
Yeah, I didn't want to use.
I don't think it's bad.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth. But like every one of those dungeon bosses, I had like that initial, okay, how do I hurt this thing? And I'm like going through each of my things, and then I find the thing that worked, or I find the tactic that worked. And I like that, but at the same time, it does feel very awkward with that control scheme, and you're kind of fumbling around, and your logic maybe isn't working in game logic. I think that
appears in a much more positive way in the shrines, because there are ways to solve the shrines that don't actually do what the developers had anticipated. And I think it's awesome that they give you that ability to do that. Like
Like the apparatus, like cheating
yeah,
the apparatus.
like those moments are really good. Like those are the really good moments in Breath of the Wild. But like the constant moblin encounters, the we talked about the weapon degradation. In a lot of ways, I feel more about this game like in a more positive way. I feel very similar to the way I felt about Metal Gear Solid 5, where I was like, you guys have built this very amazing ecosystem, but the actual moment-to-moment gameplay can get very repetitive, and I wish there were more set pieces. I wish there were more moments that distinguished themselves, and not having those could maybe be seen as a good thing for the franchise. Again, I like this game infinitely more than Skyward Sword. I despise that game. This game is something that held my attention for 50 hours, so it obviously can't be bad, but I do have criticisms about the game. Like, honestly, having 900 Korok seeds or whatever the hell it is, like, that's just unnecessary, because after you find like 40 or 50, you really don't need any more. Like, your inventory is going to be so blown out at that point. Like, why are there 900? Like, why did you put so many of them in there? Like,
no, I mean, it's not like you're forced to seek them out or anything.
No, but just get what I'm saying. Like, at that point, it just sort of becomes a collectible that I don't really understand. Like,
glad that there aren't trophies or achievements.
Oh my sweet
I know, right?
Oh my sweet Jesus.
Can you imagine if there were trophies?
It definitely is an open world that I think flows way better than the next game we're going to talk about a little bit, which the further we get out from Final Fantasy 15, the more I don't think I'm ever going to go back to that game. I tried, guys. I fired it back up. That game, and I got into a pretty... You guys know I love Stephen Meyerink, formerly of the show, to death, and he's like a brother to me, but like we got into a very heated argument over Final Fantasy 15 where just the menu design in that game makes me not want to play it. Like the trying to fast travel in that game and opening up a menu to open up another menu to think I'm fast traveling when I go to the wrong area, or the fact that I have to memorize what the place is called, then go to the fast travel menu. That game's UI is so nails on a chalkboard that I don't want to engage with it. Like it actively makes me want to stop playing it. I'm very happy to hear that they've worked on Chapter 13, and I want you guys to talk about episode Gladio, but that game, somebody needs to sit down and go through that UI again. Like,
Well, they're not going to.
I can't talk about this at all, because I'm kind of like you. I don't want to play it anymore.
I don't hate it, but it is actively refusing. So you remember when Witcher 3 came out and like the UI was a mess? Like it was functional, but it was a mess.
It was tiny?
Yeah, it was tiny, and it was hard to like find stuff, and if you like picked up a quest item and didn't look at it right away, it's basically lost in your inventory like an old school Ultima game. Like, that's cool. But like, they worked on it. They released patches, they made it better, like they really made that UI, like, it still has some issues here and there, but like it's still really, really good. I think more than a Chapter 13 rewrite, I want them to make the menus better. Like, it's just, think about how you fast travel in that game. Doesn't that suck?
It's a pain in the ass. Because they built it around the car.
It's a total pain in the ass. You have to look at where you want to go, then open up another menu to fast travel.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Let's talk about episode Gladio. He shaves his chest, I hear.
Which is a real damn shame.
Wait a second. I'm sorry.
Oh, of course, you know me.
Oh, well, I mean, so I think I talked about this on the show one time. I nearly took my nipple off shaving my chest one time for Jackie. Yep, I went way too fast, and I have never seen that much blood.
Oh my god.
It was squirting out of me, guys.
Oh my God.
Like, I have a scar.
Yes,
I have a scar. I'm going to lift up my shirt right now. Yep, I still have a scar on my right nipple from that. I nearly took the whole nipple off. And I said to her, I'm never shaving my chest ever again. And now she's okay with the chest hair. So, Derek, yay to chest hair. Caitlin, chest hair?
I mean, if you're asking me what I would ideally prefer, I think clean shaven is sexier.
Oh god damn. Okay, so Geralt is your guy.
Okay, so we're
we
fighting
know
here.
Geralt's your guy.
I
but,
mean, is there any contest where Geralt's involved? Come on. You've seen the bass scene, right?
you
The
know
very
that
beginning of
voice
the game.
only. Yeah, every time that voice actor has used that voice with another character, it's never worked. It only works with Geralt.
Because Geralt's got that bod.
He does have that. He has a swimmer's build. He really does. He has the powerful shoulders and the lanky midsection. Anywho, Gladio.
Anyway.
Gladio.
So I'll actually start by talking about the reworked Chapter 13. And we've discussed Final Fantasy 15 a lot on this podcast. I've talked about how I felt like the story was sort of unfinished or petered out, especially towards the end, which is not an uncommon criticism levied against the game at all. But, my God, like, I feel like Chapter 13's fixes, and I'm putting those in air quotes, fill in those plot holes with the subtlety of a brick to the face.
It's like gonna be good.
Oh my God, you guys!
Does this shock us? Does this shock us?
No, it's just like it's exactly what you thought happened behind the scenes, but delivered in the most straightforward, like almost insultingly asinine way. And I don't hate that they did this. Like, this would have been fine if it was in the game from the very beginning. It's just they outlined events that were like, no shit, you guys. Like, of course that's what happened behind the scenes. And it just feels so ham-fisted to me, and I don't hate that they put the effort into doing it, and the game is better for it for sure, but I watched it, and it's also like 20 minutes long total to get through the entire thing. The new chapter, 20 minutes. Yeah, you do it, and it's just like, yeah, that's what I expected. It's like you open the freezer, you open that paper bag, and there's a dead dove inside, and you're just like, I don't know what I expected.
What is that a reference
Wow.
to? Arrested Development.
Oh, okay. I've never watched it. I'm sorry. I had no idea what you were talking about.
Anyway,
I was so confused.
So while I think the new Chapter 13 is, it's whatever. It's not bad. It's just really straightforward. And there is one moment. Neither of you have gotten to Chapter 13 though, right?
No.
In the original game? Okay.
No,
well,
I've beaten the original game.
Okay, well, I'm gonna do a very mild spoiler here, and I'm sorry, but so avert your ears at this time if you don't wish to hear a minor spoiler about Chapter 13 in Final Fantasy 15. Okay, so have you heard how in Chapter 13 the reason why they did these, not just because of the stealth mechanics that were not well received, the reason why they reworked the story part of that is because you get a lot of exposition from documents strewn across the ground. Did you hear about that?
I didn't know that.
Okay, so there's like a plot point that needed to be clarified, which is why they did this, because in the original version they just had papers that you picked up and read, which is not at all how the game had told its story up to that point. So in the new version, which is sort of like, I guess you have to pick whether you want to take Noctis's path or the new path with Gladio and Ignis. In the new path where you're playing as Gladio, you see a cutscene explaining what happened, and the villain literally stands over a character and throws papers at him, and they fall on the ground. And he's like, "I'll just leave this here." I was like,
his notes, like his just like ultimate battle plan, like
yes, he's like, "I'll just leave this," and throws it on the.
Dear.
I was like, is this the most mustache twirling villain moment? I thought it was so badly done.
Skeleton.
Is it true that you have to like reload in order to see both sides? You can't.
You can access you can access the alternate Chapter 13 from the title screen of the game, but I think you might have to beat it first. I'm not 100% sure. Like the first time you go through it, you pick either one, and then you can reload from the title screen after beating the whole game. I think.
So it's not integrated seamlessly into a playthrough. You have to.
Right. So that's a bummer.
Yeah.
What it does do is it does provide the clarification, and that's fine. Okay, cool, thanks. And being able to play as Gladio for a minute is cool because it's a little teaser for his DLC. So the following day after that patch came out, they released episode Gladio. It's the first of the 3 planned mini episodes where you play as each of the 3 other characters of Noctis's crew. And so in this one you play as Gladio, who wants to become stronger, basically, so he goes to undertake the trial of Gilgamesh. Why this was never mentioned in the game proper, I don't know. But so he goes to go, and there's the problem that I have with this is that there's such an obvious hook for it in the main game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's the point where Gladio's like, I gotta go take care of some business, guys. See you later, and then leaves. It's like, come on. How much more obvious can it be that you plan to cut this out and then resell it at a premium later on? So it happens, and what it does is it explains what happened during that time, and it's actually satisfying. I thought it was a good micro story. It only takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do everything in it. Plays Gladio by himself. He plays similarly to Noctis, but he has a Valor meter, which is kind of like a mini limit break. So like as you do damage or take damage, it fills up, and then you can unleash more powerful moves. You know what it actually reminded me of was Cyan's sword tech.
Ooh.
Or Bushido in FF6, where
Okay,
like
now you're speaking my language. Cyan was my favorite character as a kid.
So the more it builds up, the stronger the move you can do, kind of thing. And then it goes back to 0, and then you just build it up again. But it happens very quickly. And then he has a rage meter as well, where the more damage you take or when you block, your passive damage that you do just goes up like a multiplier. So it's got a good risk-reward balance for being aggressive or making sure that you parry or block attacks effectively, because that just makes your base damage go up. So it's actually a lot of fun. I think that the combat works really well, and it's brief enough that, you know, the sort of limitations of those mechanics don't really ever become an issue, because you're only doing it for 2 hours, maybe max. And it tells a nice little side story. It introduces, you know, Gilgamesh, which is a fan favorite Final Fantasy character. So, I mean, you fight him on a big bridge, as one would expect, and the music is done by Keiichi Okabe, who did the soundtrack for Nier, which is freaking great. I didn't think that I wanted to hear another remix of Battle on the Big Bridge ever again, but they proved me wrong, because it's really freaking good. So I think Episode Gladio was like perfectly serviceable. It's fun. It's brief. If you don't have the season pass, it costs $5, which $5 for 2, maybe 3 hours of content if you want to stretch it out. That's not so bad.
Yeah, it doesn't sound terrible.
It's not terrible. The problem is just sort of that they wrote themselves into a corner by cutting that out of the game in the first place. And it feels like it's almost insulting to have to pay to get that extra story, because it should have just been in the game. And it includes the character Core, Leonis, General Core, who is in the very beginning of FF15 and then just kind of disappears for most of the rest of the game. Originally, he was planned to be the 5th party member alongside the rest of the guys, but when they scrapped the project for Versus 13 and remade it into 15, he took on a different role. So it was disappointing to me as somebody who had followed the game all those years to know that he was cut, and it was like, where's this character that I saw in all the promo materials? Which, of course, like I realized that the game changed during that time. So Core is featured pretty prominently in this DLC, and you get basically all of his backstory, and it's not extensive, but it's enough, and it's something that I wish we had in the main game, because I thought he was a fine character, and I wanted to know more about him. So Episode Gladio
one of the best animated faces in the game, too.
Yeah. Yeah, so Episode Gladio is, I would say, if you're a fan of Final Fantasy 15, it's worth your time. I just, you know, I have to take issue with the fact that it was cut out. Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it should have been there in the first place. So if you can get over that, then it's worth the $5. It's like 3 hours, 2-3 hours of fun. Check it out.
The further we get out from that game, I get into that mode where like a game becomes impenetrable to me when it's super complicated and I haven't played it for a long time. And that's how I'm starting to feel about 15. Like, I don't want people to think I'm rewriting the history book on that game. Like, I enjoyed it quite a bit from what I played of it, warts and all. Like, we talked about the issues we had, but it was still fun. Like, it was still enjoyable. I feel like I'm saying that about Zelda and Final Fantasy right now. Like, I don't love these games, but they are way better than the previous games that I've played in those franchises. So take that as me being positive. Like, I'm actually not trying to hate on it. But I don't know, just the longer we get around it, the less I want to play it.
Yeah, I was temporarily reinvigorated when I played Gladio, and I was like, oh man, I kind of want to go back into the main game, because in the meantime, they've released the PS4 Pro patch for the game that unlocks the frame rate to a degree. It doesn't run at a constant 60, but it can approach 60.
It looks a hell of a lot better.
So it looks better, right? So I was like, okay, now that they finally did that patch, and there's been a little bit of DLC to come out, and now I have a couple new costumes and stuff, like maybe I'll go for the Platinum finally. But I found that after finishing Gladio and going back into the game proper, I played it for like an hour or two, and then I just, it's been too long, and I feel like I would have to start over at this point if I wanted to really go for it, because I can't really get in the headspace for it. So I think that, waiting for the entire FF15 experience to be complete isn't a bad idea, and I kind of wish, in a way, I wish I would have waited, but I know myself, and there's no damn way I would have waited an extra year to play FF15 with how excited I was pre-release. Like, it's just a shame that they've added so much post-release and that people like me or us who have played so much of the game before the fact can't erase that experience. You can't forget how you felt the first time you played through it, and especially with the frustration I felt about the ending and sort of like the last third or so of the game. I can't unfeel those feelings. So even if they do stuff to fix it, that's great, and they should do that. But I can't change how I felt. So. But good for them for continuing to work on it. That's better than not doing anything at all. So.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's the same. We talked about The Witcher a second ago. Like, people that played The Witcher after it had been out for a while, they got a better experience. They really did. And with the Souls games, they patch the games, they make things better. Like, I think it's an unfortunate problem that's come along because of games being worked on after the fact, but at the same time, this also means that games don't stay broken typically.
Right.
Like I would much rather, I don't agree with people that are like, oh man, I wish when games would come out and they would be finished. It's like, yeah, but remember, like, imagine them not being able to fix glitches in games, and think about how much bigger games are these days. Like, the other option is not good. Like, this is actually okay. I can live with this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the very least, it's what Miyamoto had the adage of a rush game is bad forever, a delayed game is eventually good. And as much as I don't like or want delays for games that I'm excited about, ultimately it's like you only have one chance to make that impression, and I'd rather have the best impression that a game can muster up. I mean, Persona 5 was supposed to be out in 2014, right? So here we are.
Would you say that you don't want to give away your shot?
Caitlin,
you don't want to throw away your shot.
I'm sorry. May 20th, I will be seeing Hamilton.
Well, you better say it right then.
Alexander Hamilton?
I'm not throwing away my...
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Jackie spent way too much money on these tickets, so we're
yeah, I am jealous. Of course I'm jealous.
Oh boy. So Persona 5, we don't have it.
Yes.
We really want it.
By the time this comes out, this podcast is posted, we'll have it, hopefully.
Right. And it is, I am so ready. I was explaining to my students, like, I've been waiting for this game for 8 years almost. I was in graduate school. Like, I was single. Jackie wasn't even in my life yet. Like, that's kind of nuts that we've been waiting for this game that long.
Yep. It's been a really long time. But, somebody was showing me, I saw on Twitter the other day, and forgive me for not knowing all the details off the top of my head. Sorry, I probably should have researched this before I brought it up. But somebody posted a comparison of what the art looked like in Persona 5 back when they originally planned to release it versus what it looks like now. And the level of polish is just crazy. The characters look so much more simple. Like, the designs were the same, but the amount of detail in the art and the shadowing and the textures and stuff in the character portraits are like night and day, so much better. So I'm glad that the game had the time that it needed to cook, because Persona games have historically been very special. And I think that they can only really achieve that level of, that very, very high bar that they've set for themselves by the developers having high standards and continuing to work until it meets those standards. So it sucks really bad that the game has been delayed so much. And I wanted to play it a million times, and we should have been playing it a couple months ago even, but man, it's only a couple days left, guys. So.
I'm so ready. So to go along with Persona 5, I did want to talk about something else. So Atlas, and I apologize, I should have brought this up in the pre-show. Atlas had their big game announcement last week. We saw a lot of, you know where I'm going. A lot of games announced. Radiant Historia on 3DS, which was like, okay, and I honestly think some people must have known this was coming. Like, Kotaku ran an article about, like, underappreciated JRPGs, like, 2 days before this announcement, and they talked about Radiant Historia. Like, I started thinking back to Radiant Historia and how I kind of bounced off it. I liked aspects of it, but it was a little, something wasn't clicking for me, maybe if I played it now. And I actually was saying, oh, maybe I'll play this now, and then they announced a 3DS remake. They also announced a remake of Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey, a game that chewed me up and spit me out, and I have absolutely no desire to play it again. I just don't like
first-person dungeon crawlers. I'm not a big fan of that. And then I saw some people were very, very, very upset about the new art designs. So and also just the nature of Shin Megami Tensei in general. This seemed to be a little bit of the criticism that was leveled at Shin Megami Tensei 4 and Shin Megami Tensei Apocalypse. So I kind of wanted to get your guys' feeling on this a little bit. I came to Shin Megami Tensei very late. I didn't play Nocturne when it first came out. So I think I'm a little bit more accepting of the new art designs, although Steven did show me the art change for Radiant Historia, and I was like,
oh my god, Erica's design? Yeah.
Yeah, like went from really hardcore like female in armor to like boobalicious anime girl, and I was like,
milquetoast anime princess is what I've been calling her.
That okay, I can see that. So I want to get your gauge on this, guys. I was a little, I think on the one hand, some of the outrage I can see, but I really liked Apocalypse, all things considered. So I'm a little surprised at some of the anger right now.
I wish Robert Fender was here to talk about it because he wrote an excellent piece about this. Yeah. So it has become, after this pair of announcements, it feels like the sort of go-to for Atlas to reinvigorate their old games is to bring them back, add a new girl and an ending route attached to her, and then update the art style to be a little bit more generic moe, which I hate all of that because I'm thinking about it and it's like Persona 4 Golden added a lot to the game, and I think it is the definitive version by far, but it does add, I mean, there's kind of like the creeping moe stuff that gets in there where there's the hot spring scene, which is, I mean, it's whatever, like, I don't hate all of that automatically, and I think that Persona generally does a pretty good job of contextualizing that stuff well, and it fits in with the characters for the most part, because they're high school students and stuff, so whatever. But they added that, and they have Marie, who's like the tsundere, mysterious girl, and I thought Marie was fine when I played the game. I didn't mind her. But we had that, right? So then there was Devil Survivor 2 Record Breaker. They updated that game, and they added a new sort of epilogue scenario where there is a new girl version of I forget his name, the sort of commander of Gyps. There's like girl version of him and a new ending attached to her. Now we have Radiant Historia has this new girl in a sun hat, and she has a chronicle, so she can control histories as well, presumably. So there's a new ending attached to her. We have Shin Megami Deep Strange Journey, and there's a new girl named Alex, and there's a new ending path attached to her. So it's kind of like, I'm seeing a trend here, guys, and I don't necessarily know that I like that mold. I think that it's creatively bankrupt to a degree, and it's like if the entire basis for selling the new game is to make the art less memorable and to sort of create this artificial connection with a character who I may or may not like by promoting her very heavily before release and making it almost not necessarily like a dating type thing, because I don't know how it works, but do you know what I mean though? Like there's a pattern happening here.
I definitely see what you're saying, and I don't want to do like the typical, freshman college philosophy class thing of like, well, how do you define good art, Mr. Heemsberg? And I don't want to do that to you right now.
That's fair. That's totally subjective. Yeah.
I think art design is a little subjective. The Deep Strange Journey one didn't get me as much as the Radiant Historia.
That one doesn't look as.
Yeah, she looks like was it Nozomi from Apocalypse? Like she actually looks like the Fairy Queen a little bit, and so. Okay. But I definitely agree. It's not as striking of an art design, and I would probably say for me personally, it doesn't strike me quite as much. And
it's maybe a little more uniform, though.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess my question is, why are they doing this? Like, is this because obviously they're doing it for somebody. Somebody likes this. This is one of those things where things are done for reasons. So where is this coming from? Is this because of the change in anime aesthetics in Japan? Like we've talked about that a little bit. Like
I think that's exactly what it is.
You can't watch an anime now without having a hot spring scene, but back when we were kids, that just wasn't the case, Yeah.
I think it's very much just sort of the evolution of the industry. Yeah, the way that I think art has shifted to be sort of like a more homogenous style across a lot of anime. And these games are picking up on that trend. And it's just influenced by what consumers are buying or liking or whatever. And I don't necessarily like or agree with all of that, but I recognize that people do like that and want that, Mm-hmm. But there's no doubt that influence is felt in these new games. And I think that Atlas has traditionally handled most of this stuff pretty damn well. And especially their core, like the numbered Persona games, 3, 4, and soon to be 5, have done an excellent job of keeping that very high standard of quality, even if those elements tend to creep in here and there. Like there's stuff, I'm going to use the scary word, there's problematic stuff in all the Persona games if you look for it, if you really want to take a deep analysis, but no, I don't think any game or journey is going to be perfect from start to finish. And often the problems that arise are reflective of how people behave in real life. Like if you want to talk about Yosuke being homophobic with Kanji in Persona 4, like people are like that, you know? That doesn't mean that the game is bad because it depicts somebody who's practicing behavior that I would find reprehensible or irritating. So I just worry that that's sort of the spin-off-y type stuff. If you want to call it a spin-off, like Deep Journey and Devil Survivor and stuff, those aren't their core games. So I think those tend to take more of they go harder on the mainstream tropey anime stuff when they can. And then their core stuff seems to keep it pretty in line. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm just kind of talking like spitballing.
No. I think that these are conversations that I want to have, and I kind of want to, by extension, not move away from this, but move to another topic that I was seeing a little bit. So the reviews for Persona 5 started coming out from the big sites, and everybody is super positive on the game. I'm super ready to go, and then I want to be careful when I talk about this stuff. I don't want it to seem like I'm saying I know everything, because obviously I don't, and I want to have these discussions. I started to see a little bit of the backlash of like, well, there's no gay romance in the game, and I kind of was having the same feeling that I did a little bit with The Witcher 3, when there was a lot of the anger about not having people of color in The Witcher 3. And my buddy Simon is currently visiting us from Britain, and I asked for his opinion on it, and you're going to get a very different perspective than an American perspective. And he said, well, they're Polish game developers. They built, for The Witcher, they built a world that is diverse in terms of Europe. Like, just because you're not seeing black people or people of color doesn't mean that's not diverse. You see Italian people, you see Polish people, you see Norwegian people. Like, there's people of all different kinds. And so then we get the Persona thing of like, well, there's no gay romance. And I don't know enough about Japanese culture to say whether or not that is a thing that I should be expecting in a game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have the cultural relativism argument. That's not the argument I'm trying to have. Like, oh, well, we can't judge their culture because we're not Japanese. That's not the argument I'm trying to have. I don't know, guys. Like, I don't know if that's something that is an acceptable thing to have in a mainstream AAA video game in 2017 in Japan, if that makes sense.
I think it's very complex.
It is.
Of course. I've talked about it repeatedly. Apparently it's come up a lot in this episode, but in case I've never come out and said it, but I think I have. I'm gay, so it's...
Really, Derek? I had no idea!
So it's important to me to,
Sure.
I like looking for representation in games because it helps me have a more authentic experience that I can, identify with characters and stuff. But the thing is, like, not every person is gay, so why would every video game have to feature a gay main character? You know what I mean? Like, especially if that character is written to have a personality and isn't like an insert, character. But yeah, the problem with Persona 5 is, so I also think that there doesn't necessarily have to be a gay romance in the game available to you. Like, that's whatever. The problem that I do have is that what I have read, I haven't gotten there, obviously, since the game isn't out. And I don't know, I'll have to talk about this maybe after I play the game. But I have heard that there is like a gay couple who appears as comic relief to freak out Ryuji. And I think that's really funny. Because it's perpetuating the sort of like Japanese stereotype of gay people not being legitimate people living a legitimate lifestyle. It's sort of like a thing that you don't talk about, that you sweep under the rug, and that only exists as comic relief or the punchline to a joke. I think that's bad.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah.
I don't think they should be doing that. Should there necessarily be a gay character that you can romance as the protagonist of this game? I don't know. What if that doesn't fit, the character? Like, what if he just is straight? Like,
yeah.
Oh my, that's fine. So we don't need to shoehorn it in necessarily, but I also would appreciate if they're going to bring up homosexuality, can it not be a punchline?
I think
You
that's
know?
fair. I think you 100% have a fair opinion. Caitlin, I don't want to just be a boys talk over here, so I want to get your perspective in on this too, of course.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely a complicated situation, and I think we're getting to the point where people are expecting to have these options, and I think that they should, but at the same time, we're talking about a Japanese developer developing a game that is a very, very Japanese game. Even I think more so from everything I've heard, more so than other games in the series. What I've heard is that Persona 5 is a very it's a game that is very, very sort of set in a Japanese wait, that's going to
In a
sound weird.
context.
Yeah, even more so than P4 and P3. This is a game about Japan, and we love Japan, and I mean I love Japan, and Japan, for better or worse, they are working through things, but they are not the best in terms of progressive nature when it comes to accepting homosexuality and LGBT rights and that kind of thing. So, and I hate to say that, it sounds like a cop out to say, well, they're a Japanese developer, so why should we expect them to give a gay romance option? And it's not like Japanese developers can't, because we've seen games developed by Japanese companies where you have had the option, but it also sometimes feels like it's a struggle or even an accomplishment to have even one gay or lesbian option in a Japanese game. I mean, look, how many options were there in Fire Emblem Fates? Were there less than a handful?
There was one gay male and one lesbian.
That was it. Out of how many multiple possibilities that you had in that game,
and it's a step for sure.
Yeah.
That's fine. I don't want to derail you or make your point for you or anything, so go ahead.
No, yeah, it's a step. It's a step for sure. But I mean, I don't know. I'm not surprised, I guess, is what I'm going for, that there isn't.
See, me too.
But
and I don't necessarily expect it. It's just, would it be nice? Yeah. I would like that if that were an option. But if it doesn't fit or it just isn't meant to be or whatever, okay, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. The thing that I do take actual issue with is the portrayal of gay characters if they are going to be just joke characters.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's 100% okay. And I think we're all kind of agreeing here a little bit. I think that you start running the risk of feeling like you're filling out like one of those college pamphlets. Like if you say, well, for every, straight romance, there has to be a gay romance. And it's like, well, that doesn't, I get it on the one hand, because you're trying to make an avatar that people can identify with, especially in a game like Mass Effect, where you're playing a role. I get that, and I understand that, and I think the representation is huge. But at the same time, if a character's straight, they're straight, and if you play, and we've talked about that on the show before. It would be awesome to play an RPG where I have no option. I'm playing a gay character. That would be really cool. At the same time, though, don't make me a hot female, big-titted blonde bimbo to fill out that aspect of the male fantasy, Let me play as something that I don't necessarily play as every day. That could be really, really cool. I just don't think... I don't know. I kind of felt like there was a little bit of outrage here that I could see where it was coming from, but it felt a little much.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. And I have to reserve judgment until, I've played that and experienced it for myself.
Right.
But it seems like, I don't know, it may have been jumping the gun a little bit to be that outraged or angry about it, considering that, you're right, it's like you're saying. I mean, people are diverse, period. But and there should be representation for all people across forms of media and video games, and that's the ideal, that's the goal. But it's it's disingenuous to just go down the checklist, if that makes sense. Which is what you were saying, because in a game like Overwatch, I know that the producers of that game have said the reason why the Overwatch cast is so diverse is because they just set out to include, they were I think their reasoning name was along the lines that people are diverse, so of course the cast of Overwatch is diverse. Like if it's a game with people from all around the world in different walks of life, of course they're going to be representing, you know, they're going to be checking a lot of boxes because it just sort of happens organically in that context. Whereas in a game like Persona 5, it's happening in Japan, so we have to contextualize it as like there are high school students in Japan, so maybe in this group of students, maybe everybody is straight. Like that happens, you guys. It's okay.
I don't know about you. I always have a gay friend. Like, it's so tough because I do want. I want the representation, and I do want it, and I think that the only way things get better is when people kind of raise unholy hell a little bit, and sometimes you gotta raise unholy hell. That's good, but every once in a while I'm like, okay, this is kind of, and it's also tough because latte drinking liberal elite over here, but like when then I see that being used by the other side's argument, I kind of feel like sometimes you're fueling the other side's argument. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, now they can hold this up as this is the thing we're fighting against. Like if I hear one more person say like the gay agenda in video games, it's like, what? Like, no, that's not actually a thing. Like, I don't think Derek's trying to make everybody gay, and Derek's sitting here going, yes.
Is that what you think?
You continue to think that. Like, it's just hard. It's a really difficult conversation. And then there are also the cultural implications. Like, I'm not trying to argue cultural relativism like a freshman philosophy class, but there is some of that too, right? Like, a little step for Japan is huge. It may not be as big of a step as we want in America, but a step for Japan, like having, like, imagine how crazy that was in the 90s to have, and this will make my wife very happy right now, but imagine how crazy that was in the 90s to have Neptune and Uranus and Sailor Moon and them not be a joke.
Yeah.
Like, that's huge for 1990s Japan. That's amazing right now. And, like, I'm not saying that fixes all of the problems. No, definitely not. But, like, at the same time, let's recognize when the good stuff happens. And I think we got on that topic when we were talking about, positive female characters in games. Like, we talked a lot about that. Like, I think Aloy is freaking awesome. Does she...
Yes.
Does she fix all of the problems with female representation in video games for the past 30 years? Absolutely not. But is she a great thing that we should hold up and go, yes, more of this, please? Absolutely.
Also, ultimately, video games are a thing we play to either enjoy or to get something from in some way, whether it's beating our own personal best or just seeing the end of a story or, whatever. So I think that the end goal here is to make games enjoyable for everyone, and inclusivity isn't going to take away fun for people. It's just going to provide more options, especially when, it's done organically or well. And so I understand the fear that exists. It's like, does every game have to become this homogenized sort of, you have every single option available, but they don't put much effort into every option because they had to check everyone on the list. Like, I get where that concern comes from, but I think that it's also not realistic because not every game is doing that. And ultimately, every creator has sort of the freedom to choose what they do and don't include. And if there's pressure to include more types of people in games, I think that can really, it can kind of only benefit us because not everybody's going to listen to the pressure or listen to that suggestion. I don't know. This is a topic that we could go on about Jesus at length. And, I think ultimately I won't speak for everyone here, of course, but I mean, I just want to keep playing video games that I can get something out of, that I can enjoy. And it's nice to see myself in games sometimes. And where we are today, I have so many more options than I did a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Like I couldn't even imagine if I was a kid and if I was in my early teens and I played as a game where like the main character was gay and it was no big deal and everybody treated it, like normally. I can't imagine how that would have made me feel. So knowing that those options exist for younger players today, I think that makes me happy. And it makes me happy to see more stuff like that in games that I'm playing because it's like, cool, I see a reflection of myself and that's important to me. But at the same time, I don't want to force that on every player in every context. And like, I play as straight characters all the time and I accept that because that's who that character is. And I want that to be true to the vision of the character. I don't know. It's a lot.
I have to remind my students fairly often as a teacher, like we have an awesome GLBTQ community at the school, and it's really, really awesome. But every once in a while, I just sit the kids down and I'm like, you guys are 15 to 18 years old. I was in high school before you guys were born, for some of you guys. The strives and steps that we have taken in recent years is pretty remarkable. So, you know, that doesn't mean the fight's over, and that doesn't mean that, oh, you should be happy and, be complacent. But what that does mean is that, this stuff is getting better. And it's really, really positive. And Derek, I think you're right. To be able to play as even just a gay character today, so good for kids growing up now. Like that's so amazing for them. Like, can you imagine, even if you were a straight kid playing Mass Effect and being a character who can be gay, that's got to be a kind of different kind of impact for you, right? Like,
right. So it's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I guess that's a thing. People
right,
are gay.
this is a thing. Like, this is a thing that's been going on, and it's not something to be nervous about, and it's not something that is bad. Like, can you imagine how amazing that would be for kids today?
Yes, I agree. I'm amused because it's like, here we are, that one. I'm going to lose us one of our 3 listeners. Like, here we are promoting the SJW agenda, guys.
Uh-oh, watch out.
Just talking up a trash storm.
And I started that whole conversation with, I think that some of the anger that was directed at Witcher 3, it kind of surprised me a little bit. And it was, I didn't necessarily agree with all of it. Did I see where it was coming from? Yeah, but I didn't have to agree with all of it. And that's kind of the great thing about a lot of this stuff. You can sit down and have conversations about it and grow and kind of develop your own ideas and your own sense of self. Like, that's really, really cool. So I'm sure somebody's going to give us a bad review over this. Here we go.
Well, I will miss you, and I'm sorry that, our games talk isn't enough for you, but
can't you just talk about the games?
Yeah,
what if they made Cloud gay in the Final Fantasy VII remake?
They won't.
Like, it turns out he wanted to go on the date with Barrett the whole time.
Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't, right?
In all seriousness. And I hear he shaves his chest. Okay. So, good show, guys. Good show. Yeah. Fun conversations, and now we're all excited for Persona 5.
Oh, can't wait.
I am so excited. So yeah, thank you everybody for listening to Random Encounter. Be sure to give us messages, email us at podcast@rpgfan.com. Derek always likes reading those, and it's very, very lonely when we don't get any. Please hold off on your comments that I talk too much about Dark Souls. I mean, come on, a new DLC piece came out. Give me some kind of break. And as always, give us suggestions. We love hearing your feedback, and we want to make this show something that you guys can really enjoy. And those reviews on iTunes also make us feel really good when you guys have a chance to do that. So for myself, for Derek and Caitlin, I almost said Caitlin.
Caitlin?
I don't know.
Is that like a province in Westeros or something?
No, I was going to say that sounds like a Westerosi name, doesn't it? Like Caitlin? Like you had Caitlin.
Well, yeah,
This sounds like a thing. I think we should develop this.
If I ever find myself sucked into Game of Thrones, I guess I can use that instead of my real name, right?
This sounds like a thing, like for the Game of Thrones, I don't know, prequel that they keep threatening. Like this sounds like a thing we could actually do.
Don't do that.
So, what, a prequel?
They have to keep making money.
I mean, dear Lord, with Westworld taking 1.5 years to come out, there we go.
So sad. Why?
I know, that was so good. Man in Black, baby. Man in Black. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the podcast, and we will see you all later.
See you in Tokyo.
Peace out.
Steal your heart. I think what you mean is wake up, get out there.